The NBA offseason, a long period of 4 months of brand new acquisitions, trades, rookies going to their new teams, re-signing players, contract holdouts, and now in this offseason, trade holdouts. I didn't think we'd get this far. But anyways, as the NBA training camp is only around the corner and the preseason starting in under a month, I think it is finally time to talk about the winners and losers of the 2023 NBA offseason. The offseason has been pretty uneventful after the first week of free agency and seeing the eventful first few days of the Summer League with incoming French prospect Victor Wembanyama. But what we need to do now is to see which teams absolutely was able to make the most of this offseason, which teams stayed stagnant or even became worse due to this offseason, and which teams are the winners and the best of the best. With that being said, if you want to see more videos like these, be sure to like the video, and we are now officially on the road to 100K, so be sure to subscribe to be a part of that and to catch more videos. But as usual, this will be a long one, but you already know who it is. Roll it!
3, 2, 1.
Weights in the weight room, so he stitched up in the left. He's doing all this.
Suns, as we speak, are finalizing a trade for all-star guard Bradley Beal. The Wizards are expected to receive Chris Paul and Landry Shamet and several second-round picks. Beal is coming off averaging just over 23 points per game last season. He has been a long-time scoring machine. Injuries, however, have been a question mark. It remains to be seen, meanwhile, what the Suns' bench depth is going to look like, but they've got these three guys, and that clearly is what the ownership wanted. Since the new owner came in, they've been looking to make a splash, and they've done it now not once but twice. They acquired Durant, and they acquired Bradley Beal. They all averaged over 20 points a game last year. Great trivia question. Win something at a bar bet tonight. What's the last time the Suns had a trio that each averaged over 20 points a game? It was back in 88-89.
Wow.
The players were Tom Chambers, Kevin Johnson, and Eddie Johnson.
While the world has been waiting for the trade news about James Harden and Damian Lillard, the one that started off the summer on a hot note, no pun intended for the Suns, was the acquisition of Bradley Beal from the Washington Wizards for a plethora of pick capital to make this trade super risky in the long run, especially considering how bad the Rudy Gobert trade a year ago jacked up the trade market last year. The CP3 D-Book and KD trio was exposed in the second round against the Nuggets, and one of the main things people noticed was the fact that CP3 slowed down the pace of the Suns, and it caused a lot of inopportune moments and runs due to it. Once the lineup was changed for the prospect of a faster and younger campaign, they immediately won due to the faster pace, and I think the Suns took notice and also knew that CP3 was only going to get older and get more injuries potentially, as his history shows. But this trade continues the super team era, bringing in a shooting guard that is immediately going to have to play third fiddle to KD and Devin Booker, but as we've seen with him, he actually has done well sharing the ball with Kyle Kuzma and Kristaps Porzingis in his last year in Washington, even though they lost a lot of games. Now, I do believe that Bradley Beal will be a perfect off-ball fit for this ball-dominant duo of Kevin Durant and a debatably one of the best shooting guards in the NBA, Devin Booker. But obviously, the main question for this team is that has a big three in their center, DeAndre Ayton. Where is the depth? Because if any of them are off the court or any of them gets injured, who's going to come in and take up those minutes and potentially have a huge impact on the game? They have their main players and their scorers already, but outside of that, it gets pretty lackluster. But that is where you're potentially wrong. The Suns have made some pretty underrated signings with people who can play specific roles and provide value at certain aspects of the game. Yuta Watanabe gets signed by the Suns to provide his services as one of the best standstill three-pointer shooters in the league and really an underrated defender. Eric Gordon leaves the Clippers to play with the Suns, and of course, we know him as an absolute flamethrower if you allow him to get hot, and his ability to spread the court from deep range makes him a matchup nightmare. Damian Lee, of course, returns as a shooter. She says he met two signs from the Kings, who is a decent all-around power forward and has a lot of athleticism and ability to spread the floor. And of course, the last move that had a lot of people raving was Bol Bol. Personally, I don't have much hope for him, so we can just go on and move on. But if this team can figure out their roles together, I can easily see this team be one of the best teams in the West and in the NBA in general. Only thing I'd be concerned about is the fact that they fired their coach of the year from 2 years ago, Monty Williams. We now have to see what Frank Vogel has planned for this very polarizing team next season. But the way they were able to go younger and get Bradley Beal instead of Chris Paul, who could potentially bring them down in next year's playoffs and be able to match up a lot of depth with this trio of all-stars and not just be absolutely empty, makes the Phoenix Suns a winner of the offseason in my eyes. The Chicago Bulls. Ever since the D-Rose days, they have been hovering in the realm of obscurity and being at the most middle of the road. But where things started to look up for them was when they got DeMar DeRozan and turned Zach LaVine into an all-star in their gamble of the season, trading for main big man Nikola Vucevic. But ever since that move, absolutely nothing has gone right, and the Chicago Bulls had the opportunity to run away and tear it all down. And in my opinion, that would have been the optimal thing to do. But instead, the Bulls showed us they are super committed to their core of Zach, DeMar, and Vooch, with Nikola signing for another 3 years this summer. And for that, this makes the Chicago Bulls a loser of the offseason. The Chicago Bulls need to take a look at the writing on the wall and notice that their core is not going to get any better in the aspect of their championship window being rather small and their chances of even getting one being smaller. In their terms of talent around that big three, no one has improved at all, whether that is Kobe White or their fourth pick a few years ago and Patrick Williams, who actually needs reps if he's expected to make any type of jump. And in the terms of veteran help, who do you have that they signed this offseason? Javon Carter was pried away from the Milwaukee Bucks after how he turned himself into a real perimeter threat for the Bucks system, and of course, being an 8-tier defender. Patrick Williams is still here and will continue to get wasted with another 3 players in front of him in that pecking order. And from the Suns, they brought in Torrey Craig. So all I see is a bunch of defense and very little offensive action, unless they're determined to make the big three do all the dirty work while all the other role players do all the defensive stuff for them. But does that sound like a recipe for success when you have other teams in the East on the come up and ready to take over and make the playoffs, while this team got knocked out in the play-in with 3 all-star level players? The thing to do was to take advantage of a very open market during the summer. Zach LaVine had plenty of suitors all over the league this summer, and you wouldn't be losing out on much letting Vooch walk away, especially since you already took the L on trading him for a draft pick that turned up being in the top 10. Lastly, for DeMar, I am sure you can find another suitor for him somewhere in the league for some pieces, because he has shown that he's very much still effective in the league at what he does and has plenty of more years to give to the NBA. But the main blow of the offseason was their pickup in Lonzo Ball a year ago, who still struggles with his lower body injuries and will be out for another season healing. The Bulls could have easily admitted they made a mistake trading Vooch in that trade and giving up that pick that went top 10 by doing a sign and trade or just letting him walk, and also trading away LaVine. At least then some of the younger guys can get some development going, because by the end of this small and weird era of the Bulls will have some younger players who have had very little experience leading a team and become multiple years older without anything to show for it. With all those factors I talk about for the Chicago Bulls, I have to call them a loser of the 2023 NBA offseason.
So what are you hearing about how the Lakers are going to approach this offseason?
Look, I think we can talk about the young core, but it's really not just about names, it's about numbers, okay? If you want to bring back Rui Hachimura, Austin Reeves, and and D'Angelo Russell, what are the numbers you're talking about? Because D'Angelo Russell coming back is fine if it's the right number. But if it's too much, right, then that changes how things are. I think they're very committed to bringing back Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura. But the D'Angelo Russell number will matter here. And there is genuine interest in Kyrie Irving. And so there is a way to make that work. It's much more difficult, whether it would have to be a sign and trade. But the numbers that you allocate for Hachimura, Reeves, and D'Angelo Russell matter.
Being one of the most storied franchises in NBA history comes with its perks and its demerits. And it's true, as always, as the Lakers come into a very important offseason with them losing in the conference finals to the championship winners, Denver Nuggets. But now the real question becomes, how do they rebuild this roster that saved them during the trade deadline last year with the help of D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, and the surging Austin Reeves? Well, like Ramona Shelburne said, the Lakers were able to beautifully get all 3 of those players back on affordable contracts for the future and to guarantee a few more years of contention together. Speaking of which, also, they went on and sealed the deal with Anthony Davis for an extension to go on and get that out of the way. So even post-LeBron, whenever post-LeBron happens, Anthony Davis will at least be here to be one of the best bigs in the NBA for the purple and gold. But even when you consider the front load stuff they did, just getting back their immediate depth ASAP, the Lakers also played the game the right way by going under the radar, getting very low risk, high reward players who could potentially do something major with when their number is called. The Lakers are able to snag away Gabe Vincent from the Heat to be their backup point guard. Cam Reddish once again garners another chance in the NBA with the purple and gold, and while it's safe to say immediate minutes won't be guaranteed, if his time comes, he might be able to make something happen to make an immediate revival of his career. Taurean Prince comes in as a 3-and-D wing who is an upgrade to Troy Brown Jr. Jackson Hayes is signed to bring more athleticism to the lineup and to alleviate center minutes away from Anthony Davis. And finally, the signing that broke the internet recently, Christian Wood coming to the LA Lakers after his offseason of hell, being undervalued and everyone reportedly being sabotaged by the Mavericks themselves for that exact purpose with a near league minimum. Christian Wood now has the upside of being one of the best value players in the NBA with that contract, and for the Lakers, becoming one of the better offensive bigs in the NBA, off the bench potentially. And even though he has his weaknesses defensively, that can now be masked with the perennial DPOY candidate being there and Anthony Davis. See, everyone may have said the Lakers going into this year were still doomed to repeat what happened last year or whatever negative people spew, but what people need to remember, the only reason they struggled last season and the year before was due to all of the depth that went away for the trade acquisition of Russell Westbrook, and as soon as they got all that depth back, they ended the season 19-8. So with a team that is well-rounded and fits the strengths of AD and LeBron James, I think it is safe to say for the first time in a few years, the Los Angeles Lakers are a winner of the NBA offseason. Don't be surprised that they make it back to the conference finals or even the finals next year barring injury, because as long as LeBron doesn't regress and AD plays a significant part of the season, this free agency class they brought in will create a lot of health and a lot of depth of one of the best duos in the NBA.
James Harden is not going to be traded. Now that is a big story. He's a former Team USA guy to boot. Potentially tricky situation. Sixers held initial conversations to send him to his preferred destination, the Clippers, though nothing materialized. Daryl Morey not giving him a long-term deal in Philly has clearly not made Harden happy. Harden and Embiid together at times have been happy, at times it's been different. They were very effective last season. Take a look at where they rank on this list of dynamic duos. But again, Harden and Embiid together have yet to take the Sixers to even the Eastern Conference Finals.
Sometimes eras of an experiment must end in the NBA for the betterment of the future, and then you have the James Harden situation. Now, before I get into this, I already made an entire video on James Harden's controversy a few weeks ago, so be sure to look into that video for a way better explanation of my thoughts on that saga. But for now, let's make things simple. The Philadelphia 76ers are one of the biggest losers in the 2023 NBA offseason for many reasons. For the last few years, they've never been able to jump that hump of the second round, and it didn't matter what they did. Trading for James Harden, potentially talking to free agents too early, jeopardizing a first-round pick in the process, and it all comes crumbling down. Firing one of the biggest choke artists in sports history, Doc Rivers, and now the James Harden situation, which could cause the absolute downfall of the team himself if he decided to hold out from the team the entire season or until he gets what he wants. And after all of this ends up going away, Joel Embiid's free agency status is still there, and even he can ask for a trade. But most importantly, even without James Harden, they still have to lose out on the ability to even improve their team in any substantial way. Sure, they bring in the likes of Nick Nurse to try to clean things up in this huge mess in Philadelphia, which will be made 10 times harder because of the current controversy, but this team is starting to become unsavable. And then for the likes of talent, they almost lost out on a great bench piece in Paul Reed, and also losing out in shooter Georges Niang, a 40% three-point shooter, Shake Milton, and refusing to pay all defensive teamer Matisse Thybulle, and then traded him away. And for what? Their offseason acquisitions were as bare bones as it can be, with only the likes of Patrick Beverley and a very much unproven player in Mo Bamba coming into town. But the question still remains, how does this team go into next year more than sure that they can actually do what they are supposed to do? Win an NBA championship. They already have the league MVP as it is alone, and that should be enough as it is. And as we all know, at the end of the day, this problem is mainly on the hands of Embiid and Harden themselves to produce something. Because no matter the way you spin it, the GM and Daryl Morey has done all he could in giving the duo talent, and their downfall is due to their play in the playoffs. So even if they're expecting some random free agent to come and bail them out somehow, they're shit out of luck. But this team can't get any better than it is without dishing out some trades. So now going into the 2024 season with potentially no James Harden, no upside offensively consistently outside of Tyrese and Embiid, and maybe a little bit of Tobias Harris, and a bench with zero shot creation or top role players, we might be seeing a team that could get bounced out of the first round instead of the second. So this is why the Philadelphia 76ers are a loser of the 2023 NBA offseason.
What did the Porzingis move do for the Celtics?
I think it makes them the title favorites. That's how I feel about it. I'm looking at every team in the NBA, and I dare somebody to tell me who can the Boston Celtics not beat. I love Marcus Smart, and I'm going to miss him, and that's a tremendous loss for them in terms of their spirit. But statistically speaking, even though he was the Defensive Player of the Year the season before this one, some people look at least statistically, there was some slippage there. I'm looking at Porzingis' third best defended field goal percentage in the NBA behind Giannis and Draymond. I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about the fact that he's 7'3" and he can step away from the basket and he can shoot a J, if not a 3. I'm thinking about the fact that he had a pretty damn good season this year, played about 65 games. He's had a plethora of injuries. He's never won a playoff series, been to the playoffs twice. We get all of that. But when I think about Horford, who's not getting any younger, 37 years of age, I'm thinking about Robert Williams III. He hasn't played more than 40 games the last couple of years. He's not reliable, can't do over 60 games in his 5-year career. We understand all of that. You need an additional big body. You need an additional big body out there in terms of rim protection. You need somebody that has the ability to step out and hit shots. You're looking at him. You add size. You add size to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. You keep Derek White and Brogdon. I'm sorry. I look at the Boston Celtics and I said I can't blame them for making this deal at all.
The Boston Celtics have made it to the apex of the NBA already, fought tooth and nail to almost make it again last season, and have been in the Eastern Conference Finals 3 times in the last 4 seasons. The Celtics are right there when it comes to being a perennial championship threat. It always ended up short in one way or another, but as they made tiny moves to make themselves more of a threat each season, I think this year they made the move that actually threads the needle a little bit more for them to actually sneak in to another finals appearance. The loss of Ime Udoka was really felt as the Celtics went from a top defense in his last season to a middle of the road defense the next with Joe Mazzulla. However, they surged offensively with their new coach, and let's just start this off with some common sense. The Porzingis move was an amazing deal for the Celtics for the prospect that it matches up the Celtics with a player who fits the mold of what Joe Mazzulla is doing in Boston rather than what they was trying to do with making him a Ime Udoka replacement. Now Joe Mazzulla has a player that fits his scheme a whole lot more than it would have fit last year with all the defensive players around him and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown being the main ball handler. Ime made that team a defensive powerhouse while Mazzulla made that team an offensive powerhouse. And what better way to make them more of that by adding one of the most unguardable players in the NBA, Kristaps Porzingis, who has had a career resurgence with very little media attention in Washington, D.C., played the most games he has played since his second year in the league, shooting his best 3-ball in his career, and even in the weight room, gaining more muscle. Porzingis comes to the Celtics and provides them with an easy plug-in third scoring option instead of having to expect the rest of the starting lineup and Al Horford and Derek White to do more than they need to do come playoff time. He is still an exceptional block artist, giving the Celtics one of the best defensive front court depth in the NBA, and you still have to consider the Time Lord is still off the bench ready to help in that effort, making it impossible to score in the paint. At least it should be. And all they had to give up was Marcus Smart, Danilo Gallinari, and Mike Muscala, an absolute fleece by Brad Stevens. It sucks they had to give up Marcus Smart, the longest tenured player on the team, but if they're going to win a championship, they'll have to be a worthy sacrifice. Because again, the Celtics were going to have to hope on the development of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, especially to lead them all the way. But with Kristaps on the team, it creates a lot more space for a lot of them to do work and to create as a threat all over the court due to that third scoring option threat being right there. I can go on about how great and valuable this move is, but let's just stop here. But in that move on its own, and their draft steal in Jordan Walsh, who comes in with a lot of upside, especially as a defender for this team, makes the Boston Celtics a winner of the 2023 NBA offseason.
Welcome back. We have some monster breaking news, including a future Hall of Famer, Adrian Wojnarowski, still on the desk with us. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, Cassidy, a big one. The Washington Wizards have agreed to send Chris Paul to the Golden State Warriors for Jordan Poole and 2 future draft picks, a first-round pick, a second-round pick. And listen, this is the completion of that Bradley Beal trade with the Phoenix Suns. The Wizards have been looking for a situation to move Chris Paul onto, and now the Warriors step in, bring in Chris Paul, to play with Klay Thompson, obviously Steph Curry, and move out Jordan Poole, who will start a new 4-year, $140 million contract extension this season. This is a Warriors team that has some difficult financial decisions to make, and they made one today. And moving on Jordan Poole to the Wizards, this is certainly going to give Golden State an opportunity to have a little more breathing room and working on a contract extension with Draymond Green, who they simply do not want to lose in free agency. And now Chris Paul, who wanted to play very much for a contender, his conversations with the Wizards, Michael Winger, their president, his agent, Stephen Human, they've been working all week to try to find a landing spot for Chris Paul. And it is the Warriors.
Sometimes an empire has to eventually come falling down, and the Golden State Warriors empire, since their repeat days, has to come down eventually, even though they won a championship 2 seasons ago. But last year, the Warriors had a lot of things to go over as a team, and unfortunately came from all angles, especially if you're Jordan Poole. Who is going to get an extension? Who is getting moved? And are we retaining our young pieces? Well, unfortunately, Draymond Green kind of sped up that process in Golden State due to his punch to Jordan Poole, because reports claim that the relationship between those two were far from fixable. The new GM in Golden State, Mike Dunleavy Jr., devised a weird plan, trading away Jordan Poole, the spark plug, for an incoming 38-year-old Chris Paul, trading one of the youngest players on the roster for one of the oldest players in the league. Absolute bombshell of a trade for anyone who dared Reddit when it came out. But that also meant that Draymond Green got to get his extension he always wanted to stay with Golden State longer, and the trio gets to go after another championship run until Stephen Curry calls it quits. But before I go into this further, this is the second time Draymond has ran out a very important piece of a championship run out of Golden State. Whether it was pissing off one of the best players of all time in Kevin Durant, who would have gladly stayed in Golden State if it wasn't for him, and Jordan Poole, who would have been a mainstay if Draymond didn't give this nigga a 1-2 special. Anyways, getting away from that, I absolutely hated this move for the Warriors. The Warriors championship window was already getting closer to ending, and now it'll even get closer with a 38-year-old Chris Paul coming in to provide his services. And it's not like he's a bad player. He's still one of the better PGs in the NBA, no doubt. But for anyone who watches the Golden State Warriors, you know that CP3 isn't a great fit for their system for a few reasons. The Golden State offense involves a lot of moving off ball and direction, something CP3 not be able to handle at his age, and with his injury history, something we was forced to remember once again against the Denver Nuggets in last year's playoffs. Him being gone would be absolutely brutal for a playoff run. But then there also comes the question of lineups, because would CP3 even be cool being a general 6 man? The Golden State Warriors lineup doesn't have a lot of variability to it, and putting in CP3 means either Klay Thompson or Andrew Wiggins is coming off the bench. I can see way too many things happening here that can cause the Warriors to implode off of this move, and it doesn't look like it's going to bode well because of it. Already making their championship window smaller, trading away a young piece that would have been a leader of the future on the franchise once the trio retires, and having the potential to fail immediately due to the weirdness of it all, makes the Golden State Warriors one of the losers of the NBA 2023 offseason. Thank you for watching, and tell me your winners and losers of the NBA offseason if you agree with my takes on each team I spoke about today.